Okay, welcome to the LitCon panel, Fantasy World and Culture Creation. And we'll be talking more fantasy world building today. And I have three guests with us, Michael Ross, Karina Cantus, and Justin Lee Anderson. And so welcome. And I'll let you introduce yourselves quickly. So Michael, you introduce yourself, please.
Well, as you said, I'm Michael Ross. I live in the UK. I'm in the middle of the country, really. Near the largest city would be Manchester. And I've got the mind of a 6-year-old, I have to warn you, which is full of imagination, which helps me with my fantasy and epic fantasy books.
Okay, Justin, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Justin Lee Anderson. I'm also in the UK, but I'm up in Scotland, near Edinburgh. And I've published 2 books so far: Comedy Fantasy Carpet Diem and what I call an epic fantasy mystery, The Lost War,
which is a finalist in the great, now I can't remember what the initials are.
SPFBO.
Thank you.
There you go.
Anyway, and congratulations on that and good luck.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
And okay, Karina, introduce yourself, please. Okay, I think Karina's feed has frozen.
Oh dear, we've lost Karina.
Yeah, she's coming from Greece, and the connection's not always great. So we'll just okay. So we'll just go into the first question, and when her feed comes back,
hopefully she'll come back.
Okay, so my first question here is, you guys have done epic stuff and urban fantasy as well, but when you're doing the epic fantasy world building, do you map or do you not map?
I absolutely map. Yeah. Go ahead, Michael. Do you want to get in?
No, you go. Go on, Justin.
I absolutely mapped. I based the country of Eden is based on Edinburgh, so I very much had to map. And one of the reasons for that was, A, it was good to have the visual there of what the country looked like for me, but B, it was about logistics as well. I think one of the things that a lot of people, I think rightly, complained about in the final seasons of Game of Thrones was how much people were teleporting around the country and people were getting to places far too quickly, and it didn't hold together, and it brought people out of the story. So I was very careful about making sure that logistically people could actually get from one place to another in the right kind of time frames. And so I had a friend who DMs RPG games for us, and he actually made up a map for me, and that was really useful because when I sat down with him to look at it, I realized that in the plotting of my story, I had 2 groups going in separate directions and arriving where they were supposed to arrive at the same time. But actually, one of them was traveling for 5 days and the others were traveling for 2 days. And so it made no sense. And so having the map there for me was a lot to do with making sure that everything had an internal consistency as well.
Yeah, I did the same thing with my ships in my nautical fantasy. I had to figure out how far the ships were from, like, traveling from city to city, and map out the distances. And so, yeah, maps are very helpful. Okay, so Michael, what about you? Do you use maps?
Well, I do. Figuratively speaking, in one way, I do have maps in my epic fantasy, which is called the One Chronicles. But in my Man Cave Author's Den, I have a big map, and on that map are characters, maybe places. This is now going into the world of the elves. I've got a place called Lanya Kier, and I look at all those names and places, and they are, in fact, the books. I just look at one, and it's a book. I'm a pantser. I write by the seat of my pants. So okay. I've got about 20 books there. They will become books, but I will decide what's going to be happening as I write them. Now, it's an interesting thing you were saying, Justin, about distances and traveling around. So I brought into my idea this concept of using old ley lines. I don't know if anybody out there has heard of them. In the old days, they were really quite important. If you look, for example, in France, you'll notice all the churches all follow in a direct line on ley lines. Now, my Elvish kingdom is huge. I mean, this planet is a mere dot, a mere period mark on a map. So I use ley lines in it that the elves have managed to use themselves to travel great distances. So that's how I move around my huge kingdom.
Fascinating. It's a cool idea. I like it.
Yeah, my Arthurian fantasy has kind of the similar ideas, not ley lines, but they use portals to get from place to place. So, and it's sort of like, and there are actually like static portals, and then there are portals they can open with potions and powders and things, spells. Okay, I think we're getting Karina back, I hope. But anyway, she's trying to reconnect. So we'll just hang on here a few minutes. Yeah. Oh, here we go. The anticipation is high. Okay. Are you back with us, Karina?
Oh no, she's back but still frozen.
At the moment, got really stormy weather outside.
Maybe try a different portal to reach us.
Can you see me, hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, if it gets too bad, you can always cut the video off and go straight audio. That might help.
That is not a good picture to freeze on, I have to say, Karina. That's better.
Okay, so if you can't hear us, just give us a little quick introduction, and you
Am
can
I
go straight.
moving?
No, but you are. We can't hear you, so you're moving slowly, but we can't hear you pretty good.
You
So can
can't
you
hear
hear us?
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I keep cutting out, do I?
No,
I can hear you fine.
you're coming in okay.
Okay.
So just give us a quick introduction here. Gotta love live technical
You can't hear
problems.
me. Okay. Let's do this. Okay. Hi, I'm Karina Gantus. I am from the UK, as you can tell by my accent, but I live in Greece. I am the author of 13 books. I also am a TV radio host, and I have 2 podcasts, and I also run which is a business. I am the author of the duology, Illusional Reality 1 and 2. And great to hear, and stick around for.
Okay, you did cut out a little bit with the audio there. She's her business is Author Assist. I believe that's the right name.
How is that?
Yeah, that cut out. So just want to put that in. And her books are Illusional Reality 1 and 2. Anyway, so if the audio holds up, do you want to tell us? Do you map your world, or are you a non-mapper? Okay, did you hear the question? Okay, I think
For
we
me,
lost.
I'm a non-mapper.
Okay, she's
It's all in
okay.
here. I the first world in. I think it's something about a mapper.
Okay, yeah, we're
No.
yeah
no. Oh no, gremlins are around again.
Yeah. So, do you want to try it without video and see if we
carry on? And if I hear anything, I'll jump in.
Karina, it's a little bit like watching these old Chinese dubbed movies where your mouth moves like this, and then the words come out. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, it's really difficult. I know what it's like. I've been. It's very frustrating.
Yeah. Turn the camera off and see if you can get audio only. It might work better. Well, anyway, okay, try audio.
Okay.
Well, that seems to be working. So I take it for the question that you said that you don't use maps? Okay, we'll just move on to the next question until she figures out the audio. All right, I'm not sure if she's hearing me or not. Okay, yeah, I love technical problems on live panels. Anyway, so how detailed did you get in the world building, and what did you focus on when you were building your world?
For me, background of actor, been an actor nearly all my life in theatre and film and TV. I'm a method actor, and with method acting, I can tell you with characters in my book, I research them to the point where I can tell you, well, obviously how old they are, where they would like to go on holiday, would they like to marry, do they have children, so on. With humans, that's pretty straightforward. I can have some quite complex characters. But if, for example, now I'm talking about one of the elves, my challenge has always been to have a personality and a character with the elf that is believable. That's the same with when I was acting. If I can make that role believable, that is, I'm satisfied with that. So I spend a lot of time when I'm writing, certainly with species that are not human, trying to give them a personality and a character. And I think it's worked quite well.
So how did you contrast the elf world and the human world?
Well, I decided that, we're not too different looking from the elves. Let's face it. We've got arms, legs, a torso, a head. Fine, they've got like pointed ears and so on. I did start to then, I wanted them, obviously they have to be different. They've been around for about 3.5 million years, longer than we as humans have been around. So they've evolved quite a bit. My elvish world, we have the males are hermaphrodites. The females don't have children. It's the males that have the child and then stays to look and bring them up. It's the women then that run the whole of the elvish dimension. It's one up for the ladies on this one, I'm sure. But they obviously have two hearts. One is to pump blood around the body as they would do normally, but the other then is to solely concentrate on the brain because they're quite magical. They're very good with telepathy and telekinesis and lots of other things. So they need to keep that brain of theirs cooled off. It's no bigger than our brain, but we all know how much of our brain we use as humans, which is very small. With the elves, we're getting up to maybe about 90% they can use of their brain. So this was all part of this whole believability picture.
Okay, so what about you, Justin? What did you focus on when you were building your world?
So as I said, Eden is based on Edinburgh, and one of the things that drew me to write this book in the first place was I wanted to write a book that was set in a world based on the sort of history and mythology of Edinburgh and the etymology of a lot of the place names. So I did a lot of research on Edinburgh, basically, on where the place names came from, on what they mean, on what used to be there historically, and I built the actual world around that. And so the example that always comes to mind is, for example, I knew coming in that I wanted to have a sect of religious knights. I didn't know what they were going to be called. I didn't know where they were going to be. But there is a place in Edinburgh called, or just outside Edinburgh, called Balerno. And the old Gaelic name for it, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's along the lines of Bailernich. And I discovered that meant the place of the hawthorns. And then I looked into hawthorn bushes, and they have white flowers, which are thorny. And so that struck an idea in my mind. And what I ended up with was the religious order of the White Thorns. And so that's how I kind of built Edinburgh's history into my world and made it, something new for me. And it's been really good because it's given me a rich background to work from. It's been very, it's been fun sort of going, oh, okay, that's what that used to be, or that's where that name comes from. So I'll have something there that is, related to that. And it feels a little bit like maybe it was cheating because I didn't just make it all up from scratch. But the feedback I've had, particularly from people who know Edinburgh and people who are from Edinburgh, has been that they've really enjoyed it. They've really enjoyed seeing the references and trying to work out what the place names were and what their modern names are. And that was a lot of fun to do.
Cool. So you mentioned Gaelic, so that leads into my next question: is how did you handle languages in your world building? I mean, do you have different languages for cultures and things, or did you just?
So the only countries I have, I mean, in book one, it's not a spoiler. It's a teaser for book two. In book one, it all takes place in Eden, and so the main language is just English. But what I did do was I saw a post while I was writing it, I think, from somebody saying how sick they were of everybody just defaulting to Latin for magic words. And I thought, oh, yes, well, I'm writing a particularly Scottish book. I'll use Scots Gaelic for the language of magic. And so my magic using characters are called Drai, which is basically the Gaelic word for druid or wizard or magician. And anything that is used to speak a spell or anything like that is the Gaelic word. So I was really pleased when I came up with that idea because it just added to the sort of really Scottish feel of the book.
Yeah, I did something similar with my Arthurian book, except I used Welsh as a basis instead of Gaelic.
Okay.
And there's also a little Latin because Merlin, I figured he'd be more Latin guy. So, and there are a few other variants, and like I think I didn't actually write out the Greek, but Greek is one of the languages they use, and I believe that like Nostradamus uses the French. So,
okay.
Anyway, so Michael, how'd you handle languages?
Well, I'm really lucky. I've got a friend who is a language expert, and we decided to put together an Elvish dialect called Soldarin. I mean, we can have a very simple conversation. I've got all the numbers up as far as you want and ways of greeting, and it's quite nice. When I write it in the book, obviously, for some reason, a lot of my readers just can't speak Soldarin. So I use a different font. I also have Orcish, but I don't, again, I use a different font for that. It's a custom font I use for the Orcish. But with the elves, yeah, we sort of, I got together and we made a language in there. Of course, I bring into it the fact that a lot of elves can telepathize. So I have to use a different font for that. So there's different ways of speaking and different methods of speaking. But yeah, we've got that a very basic working Elvish language, and the dialect is called Soldarin.
Cool. Okay, so Karina, do you want to jump in? Do you have any languages in your books?
Any languages? My Ticinians, they speak like an old Shakespearean language. They use the English language, but they change words. So basically, I use the synopsis a lot for my books. So people like that I've changed. They understand it, but they like that I've changed it, the readers. But yeah, it's Shakespearean more like for the Ticinians.
So we've got Welsh, Gaelic, a little old English, and an entirely different elf language. So that's a nice variety. So okay, so yeah. So what kind of building and world building did you use when you were building your magic systems?
For me, my characters are based off of characters that were from a role-playing game that my friends and I played over years. And so a sort of structured system of different classes of magic was where my thinking started anyway. And what I worked up to from that was the idea that Drais have different skills. They're very rare, and they are born with the ability to master one particular type of magical skill. So the main character, Aranok, is an Earth Drai, which basically is similar to an elemental mage, I suppose, in that he can control things like fire and water and earth, but he also has control over, for example, gravity and light. So it's a little broader than a sort of traditional idea of an elemental mage. And then my other classes are things like there's a nature drow who controls plants, for example, and can communicate with animals. You've got metamorphs. You've got a physic drow who can control their own body, who can increase their own speed and strength and even size as necessary. And I just thought that was a really fun system to work with. On top of that, they can also do things like they can cast curses, and they can do enchantments that are they can be done across the skills. They're not skill unique, but they only have one native ability basically.
Sounds interesting. So, Karina, how's your magic system built?
Well, the Ticinians, Becky, first of all, gets taken from our dimension and taken to the fantasy. As you can see, it's a duology. See? That's Becky, that's Saya. And when she gets there, she learns that she has magical gifts. They call them gifts and not power or magic. They call them gifts. And her gifts are yet to see, being able to move things with her mind, and being able to she can control the forces of nature. A lot of the Ticinians have their own gifts, and they come down in generations. Some don't, some do. You've got ones that can grow things up and hear birds. Another that has really good hearing. All of these gifts that they have stopped the good versus evil, the evil part, from taking over the channelings, which are sacred stones in Sinia, that gives Sinia. And so, using their gifts, they've been able to stop Darthorn from taking the Ticinians' powers. But Saya has another weird side control, and this is let's say the evil side of her, and this is very dark, powerful magic that she doesn't know that she can do, and she doesn't know what happens when she's used it. Comes out in book 2, as you can see, another duology there. You have the Gessel and then Thaya. So there is good and bad magic within my main character.
That's an interesting twist on it. So, Michael, how is your magic system set up?
Well, mine are completely made up. But as an author, do we put some of our own personality into the characters? Do we have some personality to the character we're writing about, which is something we'd like to be, but maybe in real life we're not? It's okay with the humans. Well, as a human, I'm okay. I've got, I can build that up. Then when we come to the elves, that's completely different, you know. For example, all my books center around this really powerful wand. Now, this isn't just a piece of stick like Harry Potter. Please don't tell Hogwarts this, what I'm saying now. I don't want any lits against me. But this is a wand that integrates with the person. It biologically becomes part of the person. It's a very powerful wand. But the characters themselves, I just sit down and I think about, well, how different could they be without being too silly? Again, it all boils down to this idea of it. Could it be believable? And I have all sorts of species and characters in the books. I even have the very first hybrid human and elf child. It's a girl called Kier. And Kier is a very powerful empath, so she's involved in it. But, you know, in all my books, even in the serious times, I like to have a little bit of humor. It could be dark humor, but it's still humor. And so I've got a character in my books. He's a Chinese guy called Dingling, and he's always coming out with Confucius sayings. He thinks they're really important for his master, this British general, to understand when he's trying to get a point across.
Okay, so what are some of the classic fantasy elements that you played with in the books, or did you go straight up and create your own sort of fantasy tropes?
Well, for me, yeah. I mean, I just completely made them up as I'm sitting down there. As I said before, I'm a pantser. I just write. I have an idea for a chapter, but it all comes out as I start to write. And I can just embellish it as much as I like, but also at the back of my mind, there's always the ongoing plot. Where it's going to end, I don't know, but I do know there's a plot. So I try and bring in 2, 3, possibly 4 elements into the plot, so that at the end we get some.
Okay, now we've lost Michael.
Oh dear.
Okay, the technical gremlins of Friday the 13th have decided to come into Saturday, I think. So,
Looks that way.
Well, Michael freezes or unfreezes, I don't know. But Justin, what about you? Do you have any classical fantasy elements in your books, or did you sort of?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I started from, as I say, I started from characters who were based on RPG characters originally, and what I've enjoyed about quite a few reviews of the Lost War has been people who have said, you know, to begin with, this seems like a very familiar territory. You've got characters who fit kind of archetypes like, you know, mage, archer, pirate, monk, knight, all these kind of characters that seem familiar, and you know, they're built on essentially those kind of archetypes. But then it becomes clear as you progress through that this is not, you know, this is not the story you're expecting, I suppose. And that pleases me a lot, because that was exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to take something familiar and some sort of familiar characters and a setting that felt familiar, at least to begin with, and then do something unexpected with it and do something different with it. So yes, it begins in what will probably feel like a very familiar fantasy world with very familiar characters. I don't think it ends that way.
Cool.
Okay, so what about you, Karina? Did you base it on fantasy tropes, or did you go an entirely new way?
Well, it was Lord of the Rings that gave me the inspiration to write Illusion of Reality. However, there are no elves, there are no trolls, there are no goblins, there are no wands, there are no wizards. Every one of my characters are unique. All the names of the gifts of the magic is unique. The creatures are unique. What I love about fantasy is you can think of anything and it's believable because fantasy. So even though it led me to write the duology, some compared it a little, which I was quite flattered about, to The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. They also say it's quite tale-ish as well, which I didn't see at the time, but now I do. But yeah, I'm a pantser as well. I just I came back. It take an hour's journey from the cinema. The Illusion of Reality was written in my head, and then it was just the actual writing it down and type up, and then all the editing. And then when Two Towers came out, The Quest came out. again, it was the film that inspired me. But again, there are no dragons and there's no trolls and none of the fantasy, the normal fantasy characters that you have in books aren't in mine. And many, if you see the reviews on Amazon, many have said how unique the fantasy is, which I'm quite flattered, because that's what, of course, every author wants, is to stand out.
Yeah, well, it's nice that Tolkien is still inspiring authors, I think. Even if you don't use the traditional fantasy characters, so that's a fun story. So now we get to the really deep question: is research. How much research did you do for your books, and how far down that rabbit hole did you fall?
A lot. I mean, as I say, I based the entire country on Edinburgh, so I actually had a fair grounding to begin with, because I used to, in a previous life, I used to write like a tourist guidebook to Edinburgh, so I knew a fair bit about some of the etymology and certainly some like the local legends and mythology and ghost story. There's an absolute wealth of kind of dark stories and ghost stories based around Edinburgh, and so they were really nice inspiration for a number of things. There are some great, really colourful old characters from Edinburgh's history, and at least one of them directly inspired one of the characters that I've got. But yeah, I did a lot of kind of looking into, particularly, as I say, the etymology of the place names, and finding out what they were based on, and then building a place around that you know resonated with what the history of the place was. So yeah, and it was fun. I mean, I just sat and wrote about, I sat and wrote about 3 pages of A4 of just scribbled notes, handwritten notes of, a place name, and then what the origin of that was, and then ideas of what I could do off of that. And I still have those somewhere lying around. But yeah, a lot is the answer.
Okay, what about you, Michael? How what kind of research did you do?
Well, again, a lot of these characters are made up in my head. There's not a lot of research to do with that. I just let my mind be creative and come out with what I think this character should be like. There has been a little bit, I mentioned before about ley lines. So I looked and I researched that, and I just thought, well, they were real and they were pretty believable in this country, on this planet. So maybe I can use those in there. So I researched about ley lines, obviously researched about having a language, an Elvish language like the one that we decided to come up with called Soldarin. It had to sound right. I guess the other sort of research that you can do, I'm asked a lot, do you read much when you're writing? The answer is I read a little, but never in the genre I read. I'm just petrified about reading somebody else who's writing the same sort of genre and picking up ideas of them. I just don't want anything to come into my idea at all. So, for example, much later on in life, I came across Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. And you might think, what has that got to do with anything to the fantasy world? Well, it really hit me, that book, because of the way that you can use the English language to get all sorts of emotions across. I mean, I just thought it was a mind-blowing time for me. So I occasionally go back to Jane Austen and I will read those while I'm working on my books to see how she managed to get across verbally a complex emotion. And she's got all the secrets in those books. So I'll use that sort of idea as a research, but I won't read anybody, any other authors within my genre, no matter who they are.
Okay, that's cool, because you're right. Jane Austen had a very good way in language and emotion of her characters. So, what about you, Karina? How much research did you do?
Absolutely zero. I don't remember doing any research. As I said, everything was unique. Everything just came out of my imagination. So there was no research needed. The actual world building of Ticinia and of the evil parts, things. This was all from my imagination. The magic, the plot. No research needed.
Okay, so in your world building, how much is sort of like historical, sort of standard fantasy, and how much is a kind of a maybe more modern take or modern influences in the world?
I mean, you would definitely describe mine, I suppose, as pseudo-medieval, on the basis of the kind of civilization and technology that's there. But what I haven't done, and this was a deliberate choice, is I have used slightly more modern language, because Well, mostly because I just wanted to. I don't think I can really justify it beyond that. But I wanted it to be more accessible. I sometimes I do find fantasy difficult. For example, I can't, as much as I love the films, I can't read Tolkien. I can't read his prose. I just find it far too intricate and wordy, and it's just I can't do it.
Yeah,
it puts me off.
I agree.
And when I find and when I find I'm reading something where the language and the prose in particular is taking me out of the story, I find that off-putting. So what I wanted to do was write something that where the prose gets out of the way, I suppose, of the story, where the story is not, where you don't have people kind of stumbling over either the language or the prose. So I've gone for slightly more modern language, not entirely, but slightly. And for example, one of the things I've done is I've used modern swearing. I didn't bother making up, old-fashioned swearing. I just used the modern swearing, and it's, for me it was simple, but I think that the crux of it came down to, it's a fantasy world. It's my fantasy world. I made it up. I can make the rules.
Yeah.
Bingo.
So what about you, Michael? Did you have more of a historical feel, or is it, modern? I know yours is set slightly in the future, so I'm going to assume it's a little more of a modern take.
Yeah. Before I tell you, I will absolutely agree with Justin that I did, a number of times try to read Tolkien. I mean, maybe 2 pages of a description is okay, but when it goes on forever, and why I felt like jumping off the river bridge, because sometimes it got so depressing, I have no idea. But I know exactly what you mean. And this is why with my books, I bring a little bit of humor into it. I need to have some humor in there. So yes, in my books, we're set in 2087, and it all centers around a portal where the humans meet the elves for the very first time. It's been brought about because if we move forward to 2087, knowing what we're like now as humans, our planet's going to be even more disgusting than it is now. And they're actually made to sort of integrate with us to help us put planet Earth back together. So I'm set in the future. Like I said, we've mentioned language. We know what we're doing with those. I don't use any swear words. I mean, I wouldn't think that an elf would know any of the human swear words, so I didn't bring that into it at all. But they have ways of showing their displeasure, which they can do, and I do bring those into it.
Okay. Oh, cool. So, Karina, what about you? I know you start in the modern world. But is your fantasy world a little more historically based, or is it modern as well?
No, it goes from our dimension into New Mac, which is the world, and then to Sinio, which is a forest, and then the Senks, which is on top of a mountain. I would say it is a type of Lord of the Rings setting, so we would call that Middle Earth setting. There is religion mentioned, but without the word God, because they have the beliefs in these sacred stones, and that is their type of religion. There is, when she's told who she really is, and that, oh, by the way, you're going to be marrying the warlord's son because we want peace between our 2 nations. Well, she's from England. She's like, oh, hell no, So she's very stubborn and refuses to help her kinsman until she meets her betrothed, Kovon, and finds out how evil these people can be and what they've done to her kinsman already. And then she turns around and says, right, I will help you. I will do what I can, but there's going to be no marriage. So you have a little bit of old-fashioned storyline. You have the modern, you have the fairy tale, so I bring a bit of everything, I think.
Okay, so when you were creating your worlds, how did you go about creating the geography of them?
Well, as I say, for me, straightforward. I basically took a map of Edinburgh and I expanded it to the size of a country, and then I dotted about the sort of place names within Edinburgh as towns and cities instead of just areas, and expanded things where I needed things to be bigger. You know, the Black Hill became the Black Hills, which run half the length of the country, for example. But yeah, I mean, as I say, it was very much a case of, well, let's take Edinburgh and make it a country.
Oh, cool. So, Michael, how did you get your geography and your elf world created?
I think of all the amazing things we have on this planet. If you've ever been and stood, as I did in February, skiing in front of the Matterhorn, I mean, it's just an amazing structure. So on Laniakea, the Elvish dimension, I've got the Blue Whispering Mountains. They're obviously a little bit larger and they have certain properties about them. But I've also made up parts of the geography as well. There's something I have in them called Cyclani holes. And if you go near these and you just let yourself drift into it, it can recreate a universe just for you, completely from whoever's fallen into that. It can bring it out and you can create all sorts of things out of it. So things like rivers and mountains and savannas, then I have those in the Elvish dimension. Of course, there's things on there that hopefully takes your mind away from the similarities with us. I mean, I've got Credolo dragons, I've got Zosar wolves, and I've got all sorts of amazing species that start coming through. But anything that you can think of that is magnificent that you've seen from a geographical point of view on our planet, then I'll bring those in and just rework it a little bit.
Okay. Well, that sounds just kind of like a mirror image that's been distorted a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Karina, what about you? How did your geography involve in your world?
Well, you have the place, the dimension, the country, whatever you want to call it, as Numac. Ticinia, as I said, is in a forest. They live in the trees. They have a couple of buildings on the ground. The Pleki, where the sacred stones are kept, and the Escos, where they have their meetings with the town government committees. And then you have the saints, which live on top of the mountain. They live in small domes. And Darthorn, the warlord, he lives in a big dome covered in gold, of course, show how much wealth he has. That's in the first book. That's as far as we go because the Ticinians are too scared to go out of their Ticinia because they don't know what's out there, and they're very happy and contented with living in their trees with their neighbours and living in that life. But in the second book, the Ticinians are forced out of and in hiding because of Kovon attacking Ticinia. And it's up to Thaya now to go and on this quest to find a dark eye, which is the only thing that's going to help her win the war. And so she goes through the Outlands, and of course you've only heard of it once, maybe mentioned in the first book, but the Outlands, you go through Death Valley, you go through the Forest of Illusion, you go through the Helcon, city of Helcon. It's all mapped out in my head, but it's like she knows the direction she's got to go to get to her point of which is the city of Helcon. And as they go through to different places, they lose one person at Lake Weir. They come across some frightening sand creatures in Death Valley, and that's how the geography is. It's more talked about in book 2, The Quest, because they're out in the Outlands, and in book 1, the Ticinians are very happy just living in their little forest.
Okay, so in your society, how is magic perceived?
That's That's a really interesting question with respect to what I've done, because it is people who do not have magic powers are generally very prejudiced against those who do, and it's kind of one of the themes of the story. So there is a lot of anti-Drow bigotry and prejudice and fear, and Aronach, the main character, is the first Drow ever to achieve a position as high in society as the king's envoy, and he has come there very much with a kind of a mission for himself to change society, alongside the king, who has the same motive as well, and that's why they've come together and rebelled and taken the kingdom from the previous king, who was a fairly terrible king for everybody, but also was equally bigoted against magic users. And so prejudice and the effects that prejudice has on the people who are being, who are receiving that prejudice is a big theme of part of the story, and a lot of Aronach's character development and his story arc is about how he has been formed and affected by growing up with that prejudice and how he deals with it today.
Okay, so what about you, Michael? How is the elfin magic being viewed by the humans?
Oh, well, I was going to say, to start with, there's no magic on Earth. All the humans don't really believe in it. But then we come to the elves, where it's a predominant part of their life. And this is a big shock to the humans when they finally see what they can do. I mean, I've mentioned before, they can send messages by telepathy, and they can use telekinesis. They can levitate. They can do a whole manner of things. Multitasking is a piece of cake with the elves. And then it's not just that, but the creatures that I've developed in the elvish dimension are magical too. I mean, we have a creature, it's a bit like, it's a horse, it's called a barboski. It's actually related to the unicorn. No horn, no wings, but they can levitate, but they can telepathize by sending simple images, and they will bond with one of the elves and so on. So all the creatures have some form of magical ability. I guess it's something that I thought could happen if we look at ourselves as humans in another 3 million years. I'm sure magic will be in our lives in some way, shape or form.
Okay, what about you, Karina? Does your world have classes of magic, or is it just everyone accepts it?
Well, Alcazar, he's a tutor of the arts. He's instructed to teach the Ticinians that have this gift how to use it and how to control it. Not all the Ticinians have gifts. There's no jealousy or anything between them. Oh, you've got that power and I haven't got anything, sort of thing. The saints, they always thought the saints didn't have any powers, any gifts, but later on you find out they do. And it's the only thing is when Thaya and people see the other side of Thaya, this will that she's trying to control, when they see what she can do, the evil that she can do, it scares them, but they know that, this is not her. They know her as Thaya, their princess, the Queen of Ticinia. So, they don't say, well, it's not your fault, you didn't know what you were doing, sort of thing. But it does scare them that the power she's got. And Alcazar is the first one to understand basically what's going on. It's not until the end of the quest that you find out who she really is and how she's going to cope with knowing this. But because power, everyone knows about the gifts and the magic that's around. There's no prejudice about it.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap up the panel here, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books. So we'll start with Karina this time, and so where can we find you?
So Illusional Reality and The Quest are both available on Amazon on Kindle Unlimited, paperback and ebook, and also the box set of the two books together on Kindle Unlimited on Amazon as well.
Okay, Justin, where can we find you and your books?
I'm exclusive to Amazon for ebooks, so both in KU, both Carpe Diem and The Lost War are in KU. My paperbacks are on there as well as audiobooks for both books. But you can also order my paperbacks through any bookstore.
Okay, great. And Michael, where can we find you and your books?
Mainly Amazon would be the place to go. The One Chronicles is all there. It's a set. There's 4 books in the set. The first book is a free book, but that leads you into the story for the trilogy properly. So that's the One Chronicles, which is on Amazon, and also the series I'm working on at the moment, which is called The Big Fairy Adventures. That's also on Amazon as well.
Cool. Okay, so I'd like to thank the 3 of you for being here and and surviving the technical issues. So that's it for today's panel, and we will be back at 5:30 Eastern with the oh great, now I don't have that paper with me, and now I can't remember the title. Okay, so it's one of the building fiction into reality panels. So so be with us at 5:30. Yeah, okay, the coffee is definitely not kicked in yet. And okay, I'll see you later today. So bye for now.